Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by my esteemed colleagues, Mark Murphy and Jason Caldwell. We are very excited that it is game week, of course, at Auburn. They play Mercer in the season opener, what is sure to be an exciting, entertaining, I don't know how you want to put it, but it certainly won't be a boring 2022 season. Is about to get kicked off on Saturday. And so we will be doing these shows every Tuesday. You're probably listening to this on Tuesday morning or later, but we're recording this one on Monday night to go over what we learned on Monday. So we'll get Brian Harsin, we'll get his press conference every single Monday, and then kind of give our basic takeaways. And that way from here, obviously he'll have, impressions of the previous game, that kind of thing. And then after this point, we'll transition to the next game. We'll have the roundtable later in the week, and then we'll have the pregame podcast on Saturdays. But guys, it was a little bit different today. Number one, because it sort of carried fall camp news, to a conclusion. There were some things that needed to be resolved. I'm talking about injuries, talking about quarterbacks, and then also we happened to surprise. Here's TJ Finley, who got to talk to the starting quarterback. That was something that was unexpected today, but we got clarity finally on the Nick Brahms situation. In case you missed it. As we've sort of been alluding to, this is something we've kind of known for the past, not complete confirmation, but, we just wanted to be respectful to the situation. But Nick Brahms is done playing football. Obviously, a guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries. Brian Harsin confirmed that today. He hasn't been practicing. We've obviously talked about it here. He hasn't been practicing for the last 3 weeks or so, but he finally has called it a career because of this, one last issue that has bothered him, and just doesn't seem like it's going to be something feasible for him to come back for a sixth season. And so Jason, and Nick Nick put out a statement this evening talking about how difficult it was for him to make this decision, but ultimately that this was the best thing for his future. I was thinking about it. Nick Brahms has been here. This will be my 5th season covering Auburn football. Nick Brahms has been here the entire time. And beyond being a football player, which, what was it, 33 starts at center.
Yes.
At one point, 18 or 19 straight starts. I remember it was Caleb Kim when I first started was the center, and then, Brahms kind of supplanted him there. And it's just been steady Eddie for the past few seasons. But more so than that, just one of the most well-liked guys in the building over the past few years. Just an absolutely, phenomenal person. And, we're happy for him if this is the decision that he thinks is best for his future. But obviously, it is an unfortunate situation. Obviously, he would have liked to have played this season, but we finally get some clarity here on this Monday on what was the biggest injury storyline for Auburn in the preseason.
Yeah, no question. I actually ran into Nick last week, and so we kind of had an idea. So I had a story ready. I don't know, probably 10 days ago that that he was going to call it quits. I think from both sides they wanted to make sure that was the right decision. Didn't have to rush it, and so I think he did a little rehab, did some things, and then just wasn't going to work out. When you look at him, and I think he told me that was his 7th surgery, and for people that remember back, he didn't play in the bowl game. After the Alabama game, he had surgery again, missed the bowl game, was held out of contact in the spring along with Austin Troxell. But I think in the end it was just too much. That as soon as they put the pads back on and started getting contact again in the preseason, that same feeling crept back up again. And it's you got to think quality of life. And for a guy that is engaged, his future's mapped out with Delta here down the road. And so I think for Nick Brahms, it was a no-brainer situation. And Mark, we've seen these things so many times. Nick Brahms is a guy. I told him, I said, brother, here in about 6 months, you'll weigh about 230 pounds and your knees will feel a whole lot better, because he's a guy that's had to add weight and can keep getting bigger. Once guys like that kind of get done with it, he'll trim down and be a guy. He'll feel like a new person when
Yeah, and I agree with Nathan. He is really a good guy, very smart kid. He completed the Delta training program. He's got a guaranteed job. And I was a little surprised he decided to come back again, because he's been around since like 2017, I think, something like that. And I remember he had a couple serious injuries in high school down in the Florida Panhandle. And there was concern about, if he'd get to play much at all in college, but he was able to do that. And it's credit to him because, like Jason mentioned, 7 surgeries. Wow, that's just crazy. You got to really love the game to be willing to go through that to try to keep on playing football.
Yeah, now, it's something we've known for a few weeks, but they've been grooming Tate Johnson to be his replacement. And we're going to get into it today that we've got the official depth chart. That's kind of the main point of this podcast. But obviously, we wanted to get to Nick's situation too. Tate is a guy that is a little bit slimmer, around 285, 290. But I thought Brian Harsin was fun today, by the way. He was kind of snippy, and it was pretty entertaining. But somebody asked, is that an okay weight? Is he big enough to play in the SEC? And Harsin just kind of said, yeah, he's strong enough. Don't worry. That's a pretty strong dude. And we've talked to defensive linemen throughout the preseason, Jason. And I thought Marcus Harris put it the best way, saying that, look, there are different ways to succeed on the offensive line. For a guy like Tay Johnson, this is something we've repeated on this podcast, but maybe that slimmer, build for him, he gets off the line of scrimmage a lot faster. And so he's a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience. He's only played in one career game at Auburn, but something Brian Harsin mentioned today was, look, Nick's been around at practice. He hasn't called it quits and completely gone away from the team. And correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case this year. I think he'll have the option to do so, but it just doesn't seem like he's going to just up and leave the team. I think he'll still be around the program. So you've sort of had that veteran sort of mentorship with him in the preseason, and it'll be a couple games before we see a real test for Tate Johnson. But certainly, as you compare to the rest of this offensive line, he is now absolutely the focal point, considering everybody else is returning starter, returning veteran, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that Nick Brahms is going to be hanging out in the position rooms and the meeting rooms like he has, but I think he'll be out there at practice some to help out, and he'll be able to answer some questions, some of those things. And it's when you're talking about 33 starts and 40 games played at the center position, it's a massive deal. There's no other way around it. Tay Johnson is a smart kid. He's a tough kid, and he's worked extremely hard to come from a guy that people, a lot of people said, hey, why are they signing this guy? I mean, and we had people that asked us that. And I said, look, he worked and earned an offer from his junior year to his senior year. He did those things, and now he's continued that progression. And I think the question is going to be not can he handle it, in week 2 or 3. How does it look in week 7 or 8 or 10 or 12? That's the hard part, and that's the thing that nobody knows. He doesn't know, and nobody else knows how that works. And the center position is a position where you can play with strength and quickness and power. It's just not done as much anymore. It's been done in the past. I mean, heck, one of the best centers in Auburn history was Shannon Robeek, and Shannon Robeek was, if he was much a smaller guy than a lot of the other guys. And I think about, even with the Dallas Cowboys in their heyday, Mark Stepnoski was not a big guy, played center. Larry Allen and those big guys were next to him, but he was a guy that did it with quickness and power, and that's what Tate Johnson's going to have to do. But the biggest part of this is the unknown of handling the calls, handling all the things that you got to do from a mental standpoint, then snapping the ball and having that 300-pounder wear on you for a game, and then do it again the next week and do it again the next week. That's something that we'll find out. There's some depth there, but it is an unknown for sure as one of the keys, to an offensive line.
The other injury update, something that we've touched on a couple times on the board over the past few days, was Zeke Walker, the redshirt. I know he's a true junior. He's a true junior. He's played enough games. Defensive tackle. Mark, a guy who really had a few games where he popped his freshman year. He looked every bit the part of, I believe he was the number 79 recruit in the 2020 class, something like that. That was a massive recruiting win for them back over in 2020. Role diminished a little bit, if I'm remembering correctly. It was a shoulder thing for him. I know he was in a sling for a few games, so that kind of cut him back. But just a difficult situation for a guy like Zeke Walker, because that depth was improving along the defensive line. That competition was ramping up. That's something we'll talk about later. I'm sure when we get the depth chart. It's a really deep D-line rotation. And he had to deal with his knee getting scoped out, Brian Harsin said. So he's out for at least the first game of the season. You'd probably be safe to assume at least a few more games beyond that.
Yeah, it's a shame. The guy is really got some potential, and dealing with another injury this year, and I thought the injury last year limited his playing time. And you know, people can come back from these scope jobs pretty quickly. I've seen guys come back in 3 weeks or so and play in football games. It just depends on particular surgery and what exactly they're fixing in there. But um, you know, fortunately for this year's team, if you're going to have to get somebody hurt, it was going to be a backup. Defensive line, interior defensive line in particular, would probably be the best place because they really do have some quality depth there, it looks like. And, Jimmy Brumball's got 10 or 11 guys to choose from for those inside positions. And I'm curious to see how many of them actually play on Saturday night and really the whole first month of the season. Last year, they didn't play a lot of the defensive line backups, and it certainly cost them during the course of the season. So I've asked Brumball this question specifically. He said he wants to get at least 8 to 10 guys ready to go. So I'm going to be counting on Saturday night who actually plays in those positions.
Well, it wasn't a given even in these blowout games for them last year. I mean, they didn't even put some of these guys that they would put the second rotation in. But they wouldn't go beyond that. And so, like you said, it will be interesting to monitor, not just in the, how many guys they play against SEC competition, but it's got to start this weekend against Mercer. So we'll dive right into it, guys. We'll dive into the depth chart here. We'll go sort of position by position. I'm sure many people have seen it, but if you haven't, we will run through it here. This will give us an opportunity too to talk about the quarterbacks again. We talked to TJ today. Great interview with him. He's always great. Got a little bit more perspective on maybe what Robby Ashford's role looks like. And so quarterback, Jason, is pretty simple. You got TJ Finley as a starter. Zach Calzada's not listed, of course, because you got the 2 deep there. We learned a lot from TJ today. I mean, he really was sort of transparent, talking about. I thought the most important thing for him today was saying very candidly, I was not ready for last season. He said, physically, mentally, preparation-wise. And I remember before last year, he talked about the Georgia State thing, coming in, being benched, not being the starter then. He said that kind of deflated him. He said that last year too. So really, and you asked him this, Jason, how different, we talked about this when he was named starting quarterback, but just how different of a feeling is it now to where you are the starting quarterback? Like from game one, he put it a good way. He said, they're rolling out the carpet for you. They want you to do this thing. As opposed to last season where he was very truthful and saying, look, I'm a young guy. I'm still figuring things out. And it was emotional for him last year. And now he gets the opportunity to start as the team leader, to start as the offensive leader there at the quarterback position, and see where things go from there.
I think he's taking ownership, first and foremost, of his offense. Last year he ran Bo Nix's offense, and I think you hear him talk about it. But I think it was interesting, and that's why I mentioned that in the story today. I thought that was the most interesting part of the day, was him saying, look, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. Sounds eerily similar to what Malik Willis said, when he was preparing for the draft. Said the same things about his time at Auburn. Said, look, I didn't prepare to be that guy. And I think sometimes that is a learning lesson. TJ Finley sure sounds like he's learned it. He showed that in preseason camp by being the number 1 guy. And, the thing the take I can't get a feel for, because I still keep, getting some things from people going, look, they're going to play Robby Ashford. They're going to play him and leave him a role. And Brian Harsin at times says, no, it's TJ's offense. And then at other times it's like, well, it sure sounds like they're going to play somebody else. And so I'm still expecting 2 quarterbacks. I still think we'll see Robby Ashford, but I think it's TJ Finley's job to, we said this from a while, Zach Calzada's job to lose maybe when the camp started. TJ Finley's got the job right now. And they're leaning on him to go out and play well. And for Auburn, what you don't want is to start having to kind of try to fill a spot and see. The best thing for Auburn right now is TJ Finley goes out and plays well. And he sure seems like his mindset is there. But everybody else has to do their job. They got to be able to run the football, and they got to make some plays in the passing game. All those things will be a reflection of TJ Finley. But I think from a mental standpoint, he sure seems like a guy that's locked in.
Yeah, Mark, like Jason said, right now, quote, the focus, Brian Harsin said, is on TJ Finley to get the first team reps, to be able to get control of that offense, to be able to get it, his legs under him and get ready to roll. But then when I asked him about Robby Ashford, you can sort of, look at the language, and he said, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens in the, once we get the game plan for both of them, how they execute within the game plan this week. And then he later on said, both those guys, I'm excited to see how they perform this week. So again, that's when it sort of, floats back the other way. And like Jason said, it's something we've known for a while. Robby Ashford's probably going to get a shot in this game, and it's not just going to be in mop-up duty. They really want to see what he can do out there. But TJ Finley has obviously won the starting job. But I just, Ashford gives you a little bit more of a different ability with what he can do on offense, and I think they're not ready to say goodbye to the possibility of that spark. They want to see, especially because you've got a nice couple games here to settle things in. They want to see what that can look like while they still have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, there's no history of Robby Ashford playing quarterback in a college game. He was at Oregon for 2 seasons and didn't play. Played some baseball, but no football. And it's been a while since he took a snap in a real game. So it'd be interesting to see if it gets to happen on Saturday night. He's certainly a dynamic athlete. He can throw the deep ball. He can make some pretty passes, but he needs to get more consistent throwing it. There's no doubt he's good with his legs and can run the ball because he's such a good athlete. He's got a good size too. So, I won't be the least bit surprised to see him play versus the Mercer Bears.
All right, so the few more notables here on offense. We won't stop on the running backs because it's Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. Although Damari Alston got a lot of first-team reps Saturday because they're resting those two guys, and he's a good-looking ball carrier. And he's one of those guys, we've seen it in years past when they play these cupcake games. Well, they play lesser.
What should be, yeah.
What should be. We've seen this before where guys who in that number 3 spot, they can go for 100-plus yards if they kind of get their feet under them and get things rolling. Tight end, not surprising either. Obviously, John Samuel Schenker and Luke Deal behind him. We're all smart enough at this point. Hopefully, y'all know Tyler Fromm's getting in there too. It's both of them are kind of interchangeable within that offense. All those guys got first team work. But then you get into the receiver rotation. Mr. Camden Brown, the true freshman, is right behind Shed Jackson at the X spot. Not surprising there. Jason, something we were talking about before we got rolling. Chick Dawson, Tarvarish Dawson, we saw him rotate with Javarius Johnson at that slot position. Both of them get first team work, but there is no shared starter designation right now on the depth chart. It looks like Tarvarish Dawson has, quote, beat him out. Now, that doesn't matter in a position like receiver as much as it matters at something like quarterback. I would expect us to still see both of them on the field, but I guess that's where we'll stop first because we just kept hearing over and over again about how good of a camp Chick Dawson had, and apparently enough to be named the starter at slot when he's played in 2 college games and has no stats, versus a guy like Javarius Johnson who's had previous production and is going into his 4th year with the program.
Yeah, and was Auburn's best big play receiver last year. He's had some injuries, had some issues, and obviously wasn't there in the spring. And I wonder how much that's been a setback for him, maybe in terms of earning a starting role a little bit. But Javarius has been a playmaker for this offense. We've heard Tarvarish Dawson's name mentioned as a guy that they feel like has those qualities. Now it's time to show it in a game, for this team. But it's a really interesting group. There's the 2 deep at 3 different positions with Shedrick Jackson and Malcolm Johnson, Tarvarish Dawson. Then Coy Moore, Camden Brown, Javarius Johnson. I fully expect to see early on, maybe 3 or 4 more of those guys. We're going to see, some more rotation from that wide receiver group. I think we'll see Xavier Capers at some point. We'll see Landon King at some point. So there's going to be some other guys that get in the mix. But, maybe even Amari Kelly, the true freshman from Hewitt-Trussville. I think we're going to see some other guys involved at wide receiver. I think there's going to be a rotation. And I think much like some of these other positions, I think it's going to be, okay, here's our first group, but we're going to give some guys an opportunity to see who can, make a play or two and maybe earn more playing time. And, that's what it feels like for Mike Hilliard at this point.
Mark, it's exactly, and this is the bonus, by the way, of reporter perspective here, if I can do it for a second. This is the bonus of having great access in the preseason. None of this stuff is surprising to us. We've been out at practice. We've had a good feel for it. And this is pretty much the depth chart we all expected. And also the coaches have been very transparent about how they want this roster to look and how they want these lineups to look. Mark, when we were listening to Tiger Talk last week, this is exactly what Brian Harsin said. He said, 6 guys in the main rotation. And then he sort of hinted, you've got a couple other guys who will have opportunities. To me, obviously, and to y'all as well, that screams Xavier Capers and Landon King. We got to get them in there somehow. Moving on now to the offensive line, Killian Zaire is a starting left tackle. No surprise there. Brandon Coffey is the backup. Brandon Council is starting left guard. Behind him is Jeremiah Wright and Jaleel Irvin. We already talked about Tay Johnson, Jaleel Irvin, and Avery Jernigan are behind him. And then right guard, Mark, is the other one that this was brought up to Brian Harsin today. This is interesting because it's co-starters between Keandre Jones and Cam Stutz. Cam Stutz, who we saw mostly playing left guard. Now, he did play some right guard in the fall. But Keandre Jones, obviously, guys, he started 19 straight games along this offensive line. They're listed at co-starters. And when it was brought up to Harsin today, he pauses, looks at the depth chart in front of him, kind of like squints for a second and was like, interesting. And then he joked with the Auburn media representative, the SID, and said, did you put this on here? And said he was just messing around. But interesting to figure out what exactly that means, because I think we've all pretty much had Keandre Jones locked in at right guard, and we've been expecting. Look, even on Saturday, it was Brandon Council and Cam Stutz rotating at left guard. They were still rotating with the ones on Saturday. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. But Harsin, his reaction was a little interesting. We'll have to see what that looks like on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going. Cam Stutz has been around a long time, and he's not played a whole lot. A little bit on special teams, and Keandre Jones has played a lot. He's a junior, and he's one of the more experienced guys on the team in terms of getting in games and actually starting. And, I think he's probably an NFL prospect. So, he missed some practice time early with an injury in preseason, and maybe that set him back a little bit. But I just keep hearing good things about Stutz, how he's playing. And sometimes offensive linemen, the light comes on very late in their college careers, and this could be another example of that. And one thing it's a real positive is that these guys can flip and play either side at guard, and I think some of these guys at guard can move out to tackle if they need to. And I was told that all the guards have taken snaps at center too, so can't have too many centers, as Jason and I know, covering a season when they got about 6 deep on centers because of the injuries. So, I'm curious to see how the offensive line looks. I don't know that it'll be definitive what we see on Saturday night, because Mercer's probably not going to have the quality defensive lineman Auburn will see later on in the season. But these guys, except for Tay Johnson, they've got a load of college experience, the guys who I think will be the starters, and they need to play like that. And, that makes everything better when the offensive line's playing well.
No surprise at right tackle, Austin Troxell gets the nod there. Austin Troxell, who quietly had one of the best preseasons out of anybody on the entire roster. Jason had reported in his Insider a couple weeks ago about how good of a scrimmage he had, and then I forget who we were talking to, a defensive lineman, but said, he was the MVP of the entire scrimmage. And so really good preseason for him. Alec Jackson is his backup there. Then you look on defense. Still no surprises. You got a couple of different designations now for the edge rusher positions. You got the rush end and the stud end. So rush end is starters. Derek Hall, his backup would be Dylan Brooks. On the stud, you've got Eku Leota as the starter, backed up by Marcus Braggs. The actual defensive line, also no surprises. Colby Wooden, he is backed up by Morris Joseph. The Memphis transfer, also quietly pretty good preseason. Jason Jones, he was the starter at nose all the way back in the spring, the Oregon transfer. Expect to see a lot of Marquise Burks there as well. They'll probably do a fair amount of rotating. And then Marcus Harris at defensive tackle, backed up by Jeffrey Embaugh. Linebacker does not appear to be that big of a surprise either. You've got Owen Papo and Cam Riley as the 2 starters. That was something we heard like a week ago, Jason was like, yeah, Cam Riley will be the starter.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm interested to see, just because of, Wesley Steiner kind of falls more in that middle linebacker sort of role. And then Cam Riley's your rangy guy who can play a little bit more in space as you go toward the line of scrimmage. But, when all three of those guys are on the field together, which is a possibility, but also when Wes Steiner and Cam Riley are on the field together, this is something we've mentioned throughout the preseason, interested to see how they complement each other, because this has sort of been the linebacker tandem of the past couple seasons, saying, when are they going to get their opportunity, kind of waiting in the wings behind some really good linebackers Auburn's had. And now they finally get their rotation, and they finally get their opportunity in the rotation, and that's a really important position group, because of throughout the preseason, the D-line emerged as being very, very strong. Secondary answered a lot of questions in a good way. So really, as it comes down to game week here, I still think linebacker is the spot where you're saying, look, if you can get good production, if Wes Steiner and Cam Riley come out and they start hitting people and they play well against Penn State, your defense becomes pretty complete at that point, I think.
Yeah, one of the more interesting things for me is kind of going back to that defensive line, that designation. You're right. Last year, it was edge and edge, but they played those guys together a good bit. Now they're kind of designating two separate positions. And for people that look at the Auburn depth chart, what you won't see, other than maybe on the goal line or short yardage, you won't see all five of those defensive line guys on the field at the same time. Jason Jones, Marquise Burks, those guys, heavy against Arkansas, heavy against Georgia, Alabama a little bit, LSU some. But for them, it's going to be kind of situational a little bit more for those inside guys. You'll see Colby Wood and Marcus Harris, Derek Hall, probably Eku Leota on the field a lot. The key to this, one of the keys of this team is can Dylan Brooks, and you mentioned Bragg, can those guys produce enough that they can really take those guys off the field and give them a break? Because you can't have a massive drop off. And what Derek Hall and Leota are really good. There's going to be a drop off. There's no question about it. It just can't be the gaping hole, because when it is, then coaches go, we can't take them off the field. And that's what Auburn has to be able to avoid. They can't play those guys, 65, 70 defensive snaps a game like they did last year. And so there is more depth. You think about a guy like Jeffrey Emba, though. I mean, Jeffrey Emba is a guy that's a backup that, did miss the spring with a shoulder injury. Is a junior college player from France. Has only been playing football a few years. There's going to be some rust and a lot of raw involved for a really athletic big man. Just how quickly can he get up to speed and do the things you need to do to be able to succeed in the Southeastern Conference. That means playing those guys early and often. What I hope to see is second or third possession, that entire second group is on the field for Auburn. That's what they need to do, is go ahead and throw them in the fire, see what happens. And, used to hear, coaches back, and Rodney Garner was one of them, going to go, you got to throw them in the grease. Got to throw them in the grease and see what happens. This is a grease game for Jeffrey Emba, even for Jason Jones, but for Dylan Brooks, those guys that haven't played, this is the time to go out there and see what happens.
Yeah, Rodney Garner, who still, by the way, haunts some of these guys in the best possible way. We even got a name drop on Rodney Garner. I think it was Colby who talked about him, but talk about getting hardened up as a freshman. Colby Wood said that happened real quick because of like what you were just talking about, the methodology there of a guy like Rodney Garner. So the secondary is laid out. Interestingly, they don't necessarily, and I'm looking here at the depth chart from last season, they did not have that nickel position listed either. But because right now, if you look at it, you get the two corners, Nehemiah Pritchett and Jalen Simpson are obviously your starters. Behind Nehemiah, no surprise, you get Keontae Scott. JD Rim is the guy that we saw on that practice Saturday. He played a lot more nickel, I think, in the spring, and then now you started to see him sort of flex outside. I think you'll also see, he's not listed here, DJ James is listed behind Jalen Simpson, but you'll also see Austin Osbury just occasionally back there, probably whenever JD Rim is able to get in the game. And then by all indications, Mark, Caden Bridges appears to have won that other starting safety spot across from Zion Puckett, but just the way it's formatted here, you give a starting nod to Donovan Kaufman, who can play safety and has done so. It seems like he's maybe more a little bit of the starting nickel when you're looking at it here, but that was a big.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Keontae Scott be
nickel.
starting nickel.
Yeah,
I've got that from a very good source. So,
yeah.
I was a little bit surprised they didn't put a nickel on the depth chart because, dang, they played nickel more than did anything last year. If you go back and look at the percentage of plays, but they got lots of guys that can play nickel. Zion Puckett can certainly play there. Donovan Kaufman can play there. JD Rim can play there. And, Zach Etheridge told me he wants everybody in the secondary to know how to play every position. Now, some guys are certainly better suited for other spots than others, but there's no downside in knowing what everybody else is doing back there. And Zach was a smart player at Auburn, and he knew all the positions then, and he believes in his current guys doing that. And there's no downside to that.
Yeah, I think it's much like we're talking about on the defensive line too. I think the way this secondary is situated may be dependent on what type of team you're playing. I think against Mercer, you could see Donovan Kaufman at safety and see Deontay Scott at nickel because they're going to spread the field on you. They're not going to try to line up and power you. They know that's not going to be able. They're going to do that. They got some big play receivers, so they're going to spread you out a little bit more. You got a little bit more coverage on the field with a guy like Donovan Kaufman at safety, and against a Mississippi State, I think you'll see that. Against even in Alabama, some teams that they want to throw it and spread you out a little bit more. You'll probably go more coverage wise, and in the power teams, you got you start thinking about the size potentially at safety with Puckett at 227. You look at even Caden Bridges, but Donovan Kaufman's a guy that can tackle and come up physical. So they've got some options because of like a Keontae Scott that can do some different things, and Donovan Kaufman as well. That versatility could be big.
Yeah, and Scott continues to, playing off Mark's point there, continues to be a guy that just rapid ascension, just strictly in terms of days on campus, because, day by day, if you're looking at, what he's done in this defense, he only arrived 3 or 4 days before preseason camp started and, absolutely accelerated up the depth chart. And something Zach Etheridge mentioned, like Mark said, was, how much he started to gel with his teammates almost instantly. And, lest we forget the number one cornerback prospect on the JUCO level. And obviously, like you mentioned, Jason, Jeffrey Embaugh, the number one overall JUCO player, seems like he has a pretty good opportunity to make an impact here. And then they also got the number one JUCO safety in Marquise Gilbert. We'll see how he contributes. Of course, like we mentioned, Bridges might be above him in that safety rotation. Craig McDonald as well as another, talking about big guys at that safety position. Craig McDonald looks more like an outside linebacker than a safety. So lots of different things they can do there. Last is the special teams. We'll just run through it here. Anders Carlson obviously is ready to go. Brian Harsin said today that, if he wants to do kickoffs, he was asked, if he was going to handle kickoff duties. Harsin said, look, man, that's up to him. Like it's that's where you get to the point you've got a 6th-year senior and you're sort of saying, it's your call. Oscar Chapman is it punter. I don't know if you guys noticed this. Did you guys notice that Alex McPherson is the backup punter?
Right.
Not a lot of guys with his talent level. And we've started to see that already watching him on Saturday, but they've got Marshall Myers on the roster. But
yeah, Marshall's really more of a kicker. They list him as a punter, but he's more of a true kicker as well. McPherson's a guy that did some punting in high school. But it's you're not in as good a position behind Oscar Chapman in the punting game as you were a year ago, and that's obviously they need to keep him healthy because he's a weapon and one of the best punters in the country. But it would obviously be a huge difference if he's not on the field for sure.
Yeah, I think the kickers are good because they also have Evan McGuire, and but when he got a chance to kick last year, he was very good, and so they got 3 quality kickers in my opinion.
Yeah, the only one missing there is obviously Ben Patton, is the only preseason transfer. Apparently found a home at Michigan State as a grad transfer. didn't necessarily look up what their kicking needs are, but might see him on the field.
Yeah, I think they
in the Big
brought him
Ten.
in for a depth piece, and it's
Yeah.
for him it's fairly closer to home, I think. So for him, it's an opportunity to kind of hey, join a pretty good program there at Michigan State too.
Yeah, talking about something on the rise for sure. And then the return men, what we expected as well. You've got Javarius Johnson. He ended last season as your punt return guy. Was actually really good.
Yeah, he was.
And he only had he didn't meet any. I think we've talked about this before. He didn't meet any of the thresholds because he didn't return enough punts, but his averages were really good. And then Keontae Scott. So you got two number 6s there at punt return. And then the top kick return duo is Jarquez Hunter and Nehemiah Pritchett. No surprises with those guys either, because Pritchett also, it's like Pritchett on kick returns was also really, really good. Might be the fastest guy on the entire roster. So give him an opportunity to get ahead of steam and get rolling there. And so, that's it. I mean, we've got the official depth chart now, and it hasn't been it's not the most surprising that it's been in the past few years, but certainly, a few tidbits here and there that we wanted to break down. And so, you guys, I guess, as we look forward to the rest of the week, Mark, it's now at the point where we're starting to look ahead and check out what Mercer did in their most recent game. And something Brian Harsin talked about today. He's like, we can't, this is, he listed off the yardage, whatever they put up. Obviously, they put up 63 points. And when we walked into the building today, Mark, the game was on and they had 63 with 10 minutes left in the game. So that was,
they called the dogs off. I think it was 42 to 10 or something like that at halftime. And they had a lot of big plays. I think 4 touchdown passes of 29 yards or longer, 93-yard kickoff return, a couple long runs. And Mercer's got 15 starters back, 8 on offense, 7 on defense, plus some transfers too. And, I was looking at the guys who made those big plays. They'd been at other programs that had a lot of success, like Georgia, Coastal Carolina, James Madison, places like that. So, the coach over there, Cronic, said a couple of weeks ago that he had a really good feeling about his team. And, that was a pretty impressive opener, even though the competition wasn't great.
Yeah, I believe they were the number 3 scoring offense in their conference from last season, and just overall on the FCS level, one of the better offenses. So I think you're looking at an early test, an early challenge. Obviously, Auburn's expected to win by a lot for Auburn's defense in this first game. And then the next week, San Jose State, their defensive front is pretty nice in the Mountain West. You kind of flip there and give the challenge a little bit more to Auburn's offense. But either way, we will get more into that over the course of the week at auburnundercover.com. Be sure to go check us out. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. We're going to have a lot more stuff throughout the rest of the week. Of course, we're very excited to be back for game week. We will be back on this feed for you guys Thursday morning. That is when we will have the roundtable. The entire crew of our team reporters will get together and preview the game and give our predictions for the first game of the season inside Jordan-Hare Stadium, where it'll be under the lights. They'll be turning that light show back on like they like to do. And the Brian Harsin, second year Brian Harsin's era at Auburn will get kicked off. So thank you guys so much for listening to this edition of the podcast. The intro and outro music is by Beats by Mordecai. You guys can follow him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. If you guys enjoyed it, 5-star review. That's the number one thing that helps us out. We will talk to you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.